He was our guide, taking us through Neverland Ranch. Miko, you've spent a lot of time up here. This place is so big that obviously this isn't just...
Do you ever wish you could reach out and actually touch the objects that made Michael Jackson a legend? For 17 long years, Neverland Ranch has stood completely silent, locked away from the world. No one was allowed in. No one knew what was still hidden inside. But in 2024, when the official Michael Jackson biopic film crew finally returned, everything changed. They unlocked a secret area that even Michael's own family rarely touched, his private garage and hidden warehouse. What they found inside wasn't just ordinary memorabilia. These were deeply personal treasures, the silent secrets the King of Pop had kept hidden for decades. Dusty Rolls Royces frozen in time. The exact socks and shoes he wore while performing Billie Jean. Handwritten notebooks. Custom Disney statues made just for him. Some of the items were so intimate that the entire film crew stopped dead in their tracks, speechless. Today we're stepping inside that secret warehouse for the very first time. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay until the end, because the deeper we go, the more it feels like Michael Jackson is still alive. Are you ready? Let's go. Chapter 1. Neverland Ranch, the house frozen in time. First, imagine a place where time itself decided to stop. 17 years after Michael Jackson took his last breath on June 25, 2009, Neverland Ranch still looks exactly like it did on that tragic summer day. The carousel still stands motionless in the middle of the vast lawn. The private zoo enclosures are empty and silent. The train tracks that once carried laughing children now lie covered in thick layers of dust and fallen leaves. The entire 2,700-acre estate feels like a giant, beautiful tomb, a fairy tale kingdom preserved in amber, waiting for a king who will never return. After Michael's death, the gates were immediately locked and chained. The estate was placed under strict legal protection while the family and executors fought bitter battles over his will, his fortune, and the future of Neverland itself. No one was allowed inside except for a small team of security guards and maintenance workers. The once vibrant Wonderland became a forbidden zone. Paparazzi helicopters that used to circle overhead eventually gave up. For years, the only sounds were the wind rustling through the old oak trees and the occasional creak of an abandoned ride swaying in the breeze. But in early 2024, something extraordinary happened. A major Hollywood studio announced they were making an official Michael Jackson biopic. To capture the most authentic feeling possible, the producers made an urgent request. They needed to film inside Neverland Ranch itself. After months of negotiations with the estate executors and the Jackson family, permission was finally granted. For the first time in 17 years, outsiders, a full film crew with cameras, lights, and sound equipment, would be allowed through those legendary gates. It was a cool, misty morning in late February 2024 when the crew arrived. Gray clouds hung low over the Santa Ynez Valley. A light drizzle fell, making the long driveway glisten like black glass. The massive iron gates, rusted slightly at the edges from years of neglect, slowly swung open with a deep metallic groan that echoed across the empty grounds. Several members of the crew later admitted they felt chills run down their spines the moment they drove through. The director turned to his assistant and whispered, "It feels like we're stepping into a time capsule, or maybe a haunted house." They were led first through the main house, where everything looked eerily untouched. Family photos still sat on the grand piano, exactly as Michael had left them. A half-finished drawing by one of the children remained on a side table. But the real shock came when the estate manager stopped in front of a heavy, unmarked door at the far end of the property, the entrance to Michael's private garage and secret warehouse. This was the area almost no one had seen since 2009. The manager pulled out an old set of keys. His hands trembled slightly as he inserted the key into the rusted lock. For a few tense seconds, nothing happened. Then came a loud click that seemed to echo forever in the silence. He pushed the heavy metal door open. A rush of stale, cool air washed over the crew. The smell of old leather, dust, and faint traces of Michael's favorite cologne still lingering after all these years. Someone in the back gasped audibly. Inside, the scene was breathtaking. Rows of pristine Rolls-Royces sat exactly where Michael had parked them, covered in a thin layer of dust, but otherwise untouched. The chrome still gleamed under the dim warehouse lights. Next to the cars were carefully wrapped packages and shelves filled with personal treasures. One crew member reached out and gently lifted a clear plastic cover, revealing a pair of white socks and shiny black shoes, the exact ones Michael wore during his legendary Billie Jean performance at Motown 25. A senior prop master who had worked on dozens of big-budget films later said his voice cracked when he saw them. "I've handled costumes from every era of Hollywood, but touching these felt different. It felt like touching history, like touching him." As the crew moved deeper into the warehouse, more secrets revealed themselves under the flashlight beams. Handwritten notebooks filled with Michael's neat, slanted writing, custom Disney dioramas built especially for him, a small statue of a butler holding a tray of cookies, a private joke only Michael and his closest friends understood. Every object told a quiet story of a man who saved everything because he could never let go of the past. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming steadily on the metal roof of the warehouse. Inside, the only sounds were the soft footsteps of the crew and the occasional whisper of amazement. No one spoke loudly. It felt almost disrespectful, like they had walked into a sacred tomb. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, Neverland Ranch was breathing again. But it wasn't just a movie set anymore. It had become something far more powerful, a portal back to the private world of Michael Jackson, the man behind the myth. And this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. The secret warehouse is opened. The first shocking scene. The heavy metal door finally gave way with a long, reluctant creak. It was a damp, gray afternoon in late April 2024. Light rain misted over the Santa Ynez Valley as the film crew stood frozen at the entrance of Michael Jackson's private garage and warehouse, a building that had remained sealed and untouched for exactly 17 years. The moment the door swung open, a thick wave of stale air rolled out, a mixture of aged leather, dust, faint cologne, and something almost sacred. One crew member later described it as walking into a tomb that still had a heartbeat. The lights inside were dim, flickering weakly from old bulbs that hadn't been turned on since 2009. Beams from the crew's flashlights cut through the floating dust like searchlights in a forgotten cathedral. Time had literally stopped. Right in front of them, parked in perfect formation exactly as Michael had left them in the summer of 2009, sat a row of pristine Rolls-Royces. Not one had been moved. Not one had been driven. The 1985 Rolls-Royce Corniche in deep burgundy still gleamed under its thin veil of dust. Next to it was a silver cloud and a bulletproof 1985 Mercedes-Benz 500 SEL that Michael had specially ordered for security. Their tires were slightly deflated, the chrome dull, but otherwise they looked ready for the king of pop to slide behind the wheel at any moment. A senior prop master who had worked on major Hollywood productions for over 20 years stopped dead in his tracks. His voice cracked as he whispered, "My God, it's like he just stepped out for a minute and never came back." The entire crew fell into an almost reverent silence. No one dared speak loudly. The only sounds were the soft crunch of their shoes on the dusty concrete floor and the distant patter of rain on the metal roof. One young assistant director later admitted she had to fight back tears. It felt wrong to be there, like we were intruding on the most private part of his life. As they moved deeper into the warehouse, more revelations appeared under the flashlight beams. Shelves lined with carefully wrapped packages, boxes labeled in Michael's own neat handwriting, a large custom diorama built by Disney engineers, a miniature Neverland scene complete with tiny rides and lights. Nearby stood the small butler statue holding a tray of cookies, the very one that once greeted guests in the main house foyer. But the most emotional discovery came when a crew member gently lifted a clear protective cover from a clothing rack. There, perfectly preserved, were the white socks and shiny black loafers Michael wore during his iconic Billie Jean performance at Motown 25 in 1983, the night he first moonwalked into legend. The socks still had the slight wear on the toes from that famous spin. One technician, a lifelong Michael fan, had to step outside for air because the sight hit him so hard. The film's director quietly told his cinematographer, "This isn't just a location scout anymore. We're standing inside his memory." What made the scene even more powerful was how untouched everything felt. Michael had kept these cars for decades, refusing to sell or even drive most of them after a certain point. He treated them like time capsules of happier days. The warehouse wasn't just storage, it was his sanctuary, a place where he could escape the chaos of fame and surround himself with objects that brought him comfort and joy. One longtime estate worker who accompanied the crew that day shared a quiet observation. Michael never threw anything away that held meaning. Every car, every notebook, every little gift, they all told a story he didn't want to forget. As the crew continued exploring, they found more intimate items, handwritten notes, childhood mementos, and even a small collection of children's drawings that fans and friends had sent him over the years. Each object whispered the same truth. This was not the king of pop's warehouse. This was a father's, a dreamer's, and a deeply lonely man's private world. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming steadily on the roof like a heartbeat. Inside, the crew moved slowly, almost reverently, careful not to disturb the dust that had settled like a protective blanket over everything. Several members later said the experience changed how they viewed the entire biopic. It stopped being just a movie, it became something much more personal. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, someone had stepped into the hidden heart of Neverland Ranch. And what they found wasn't just cars and clothes. They found the quiet, unguarded soul of Michael Jackson himself, frozen in time, waiting silently for the world to remember the man behind the myth. The discoveries in that warehouse would go on to shape some of the most emotional scenes in the film. But more importantly, they reminded everyone present that day of one undeniable truth. Even after 17 years, Michael Jackson's presence was still very much alive inside those walls. Chapter 3: The Secret Personal Treasures They Discovered. As the film crew moved deeper into the dimly lit warehouse, the air grew heavier with history. Flashlights swept across shelves and racks that hadn't been touched in 17 years. What they found next wasn't just stuff. These were deeply intimate pieces of Michael Jackson's private world, objects that revealed the man behind the myth more than any interview or documentary ever could. The first item that stopped everyone cold was hanging on a simple clothing rack under a clear protective cover. There, perfectly preserved, were the white socks and shiny black loafers Michael wore during his legendary Billie Jean performance at Motown 25 in 1983, the exact night he introduced the world to the moonwalk and changed pop culture forever. The socks still showed the slight wear on the toes from that famous spin. The leather on the shoes had that unmistakable sheen from stage lights and years of dancing. One crew member, a lifelong fan, knelt down and whispered, "These aren't costumes. These are the shoes that made history." The prop master later admitted his hands were shaking when he documented them. For a few silent moments, the entire team stood in awe, realizing they were looking at the very items that helped create one of the most iconic performances in music history. Nearby, on a small wooden desk, they discovered something even more personal: Michael's handwritten notebooks from when he was just 21 years old. One notebook, dated 1979, contained his private mission statement. In his neat, slanted handwriting, Michael had written, MJ will be my new name, no more Michael Jackson. I want a whole new character, a whole new look. I should be a totally different person. He outlined exactly how he planned to reinvent himself, studying every aspect of entertainment, changing his image, and creating a new identity. The crew was stunned. This was the moment a young Michael Jackson decided to become the king of pop. One producer read the words aloud softly and said he was already planning his legend at 21. The notebook pages were filled with sketches, lyrics, and deeply personal reflections, raw thoughts from a young man who already felt the weight of fame pressing down on him. A few shelves over, the team uncovered several custom pieces made exclusively for Michael by Disney. One was a beautiful diorama of Neverland Ranch, a miniature version complete with tiny working rides, lights, and even a miniature train. Disney engineers had built it as a special gift. Another item was a life-size statue of a butler holding a silver tray of cookies, a private joke between Michael and his closest friends. The butler's face had a warm, welcoming smile, exactly how Michael wanted guests to feel when they entered his home. The crew found these whimsical pieces incredibly touching. One set designer said quietly, he built an entire fantasy world, but he also needed these small, childlike things to feel safe. Then came one of the most emotionally charged discoveries of the day. Tucked carefully inside a glass case was a gift from Elizabeth Taylor, a small, elegant plaque that simply read, MJ Love E.T. It was accompanied by a handwritten note from the legendary actress. Elizabeth had been one of Michael's closest friends and fiercest protectors. The plaque was placed right next to a collection of children's drawings and letters fans had sent him over the years. Many of the drawings showed Michael as a superhero or a friend. Some were from sick children he had invited to Neverland. Seeing these personal mementos side by side with million-dollar cars made the contrast crystal clear. Michael surrounded himself with luxury, but what he treasured most were simple symbols of love and innocence. Scattered throughout the warehouse were dozens of other intimate items that painted an even fuller picture. Framed family photographs from the Jackson 5 era, showing a young Michael smiling beside his brothers and sisters. Handwritten notes and grocery lists written in his own hand. A small box containing childhood mementos, a tiny toy from his earliest days, a worn baseball cap, and a faded ribbon from one of his first performances. Several private journals filled with late-night thoughts about loneliness, God, and his dreams for the future. One crew member later described the feeling. It wasn't like walking through a museum. It felt like we had opened Michael's diary. Every object had a soul. The rain continued to fall steadily outside, creating a soft, rhythmic backdrop as the team worked in hushed tones. No one wanted to break the almost sacred silence that had settled over the warehouse. Several people wiped away tears when they realized how carefully Michael had preserved these pieces of his life. He hadn't just collected things. He had protected memories, emotions, and fragments of the childhood he felt he had lost. By the time the crew finished their initial walkthrough, they understood something profound. This wasn't a random storage space. It was Michael Jackson's private sanctuary, a place where the king of pop could be simply Michael, the boy who never grew up, the man who saved every little thing that reminded him he was loved. These weren't just objects. They were the quiet heartbeat of a legend who lived most of his life in public, yet kept his truest self locked away in the shadows. Chapter 4. The stories behind the object. As the film crew stood inside the dimly lit warehouse in the spring of 2024, every object began to whisper its own story, pulling them backward through time. The first story belonged to the Rolls-Royces. Michael had bought his first one in the early 1980s, right after Thriller exploded. He kept adding to the collection throughout the 1980s and 1990s. By 2009, there were more than a dozen luxury cars parked in perfect rows, some never driven more than a few times. He couldn't bear to sell or give them away. To Michael, each car represented a moment of joy, freedom, and escape from the chaos of fame. One crew member ran a gloved hand along the dusty hood of a 1985 Burgundy Corniche and whispered, "He held onto these for 30 years, like they were old friends he didn't want to lose." Further inside, they found the handwritten notebook from 1979, when Michael was only 21 years old. In his careful, slanted script, he had written his secret manifesto. "MJ will be my new name, no more Michael Jackson. I want a whole new character, a whole new look. I should be a totally different person." This was the exact moment the boy from Gary, Indiana, decided to reinvent himself completely. He was already planning the moonwalk, the red leather jacket, the sequins, and the global superstar image, while the rest of the world still saw him as the cute lead singer of the Jackson 5. Reading those words in the quiet warehouse felt like hearing Michael's voice from 45 years ago. But the most tender stories came from the objects that revealed his love for children. The custom Disney diorama, a miniature Neverland with tiny working rides, had been built especially for him in the late 1980s. Next to it stood the life-size butler statue holding a silver tray of cookies, placed there to make every guest feel instantly welcome. These weren't expensive showpieces. They were Michael's way of recreating the childhood wonder he never experienced. While other stars collected art or cars for status, Michael collected symbols of innocence and joy because he was desperately trying to give himself the carefree childhood that had been stolen from him by fame and a strict father. Chapter 5: Deep Analysis and Profound Meaning. Why did Michael keep everything so carefully? The answer became painfully clear the longer the crew stayed in that warehouse. These weren't random possessions. They were emotional anchors. In a life filled with lawsuits, accusations, and constant public scrutiny, the only things Michael could truly trust were the objects he could control and protect. Every notebook, every pair of socks, every childlike gift was a silent promise to himself. This part of me is safe. This part of me is real. The secret warehouse revealed the Michael the stage never showed. On stage, he was the untouchable king of pop, sharp, powerful, electrifying. But in that dusty garage, he was simply Michael, a lonely, gentle man who never threw away anything that reminded him he was loved. The Rolls Royces he rarely drove, the childhood mementos, the handwritten dreams from age 21, all of it formed a private museum of a heart that had been hurt too many times by the outside world. In the end, Michael didn't leave behind just money or real estate. He left an emotional treasure far more valuable. While his estate continues to generate hundreds of millions of dollars, these quiet objects in the warehouse tell a deeper truth. The real legacy wasn't the fortune. It was the fragile, childlike heart he tried so hard to protect. Standing among those relics in 2024, the film crew understood something profound. Michael Jackson spent his entire adult life trying to relive the childhood he never had. Every diorama, every cookie tray, every preserved car was part of that heartbreaking attempt. He surrounded himself with innocence because the world had taken his own innocence away too early. These items don't just show how lonely he was. They show how desperately he craved love, the pure, unconditional kind he tried to give to children all over the world, but rarely received for himself. 17 years after his death, the warehouse still felt warm with his presence. The dust, the silence, and the carefully preserved objects created a portrait more honest than any photograph. A man who built a fantasy kingdom because reality had been too cruel, and who kept every little piece of that fantasy so he would never have to let it go. The crew left the warehouse that day in silence, deeply moved. They had come looking for props for a movie. They left carrying pieces of a man's soul. Chapter 6: Neverland Today and Michael Jackson's Enduring Legacy. The film crew eventually packed up their cameras and lights and left Neverland Ranch in the summer of 2024. The heavy warehouse door was locked once again, the gates swung shut, and just like that, the 2,700-acre estate slipped back into its long, deep silence. But something had changed. Neverland no longer felt completely abandoned. For the first time in 17 years, people had walked through its secret spaces, touched Michael's most personal belongings, and breathed the same air he once breathed. The estate now carried a new kind of energy, quieter, heavier, and strangely alive. Today, in 2026, Neverland Ranch remains closed to the public. The famous golden gates with the Neverland sign still stand at the entrance, weathered but proud. The carousel, the train tracks, the rose gardens, and the empty zoo enclosures are all still there, frozen exactly as Michael left them. Security patrols the property 24/7. Drones occasionally fly overhead, but no one is allowed inside without special permission from the estate executors. Yet those who live nearby or have worked on the property report something remarkable. Neverland has become haunted in the most beautiful and mysterious way. Ranch workers and security guards tell stories that send chills down your spine. Late at night, when the valley is completely dark, soft music can sometimes be heard floating across the grounds. Faint piano notes playing Moonlight Sonata, or the unmistakable opening beats of Billie Jean. Some guards swear they've seen lights turning on and off inside the main house when no one is there. Others describe seeing a tall, slender figure in a red jacket walking slowly along the path near the warehouse, only for the figure to vanish when approached. One longtime security officer who has worked at Neverland since 2012 told the crew during the 2024 filming, "Some nights you feel him, not in a scary way, but like he's checking on his home, like he's still making sure everything is okay." These aren't wild ghost stories invented for clicks. Multiple members of the 2024 biopic crew reported similar experiences while filming. One assistant director said she woke up in her trailer at 3 a.m. to the sound of children laughing near the old carousel, even though the park had been shut down for years. Another crew member captured an unexplained orb of light floating through the warehouse on camera the night they opened the secret door. The footage has never been publicly released, but those who saw it say it felt peaceful rather than frightening. The secret warehouse itself remains locked. The Rolls Royces still sit in their original positions, now with a slightly thicker layer of dust. The Billie Jean shoes, the handwritten notebooks, the Disney diorama, and the Elizabeth Taylor plaque are all back in their places, carefully documented and preserved by the estate. They have become part of Neverland's living legend. What will happen to Neverland in the future remains one of the biggest mysteries in Michael Jackson's story. Some family members want to turn parts of it into a permanent museum or cultural center. Others hope it stays exactly as it is, a private, sacred place where Michael's spirit can rest undisturbed. B.G. Jackson, now 24, has visited the ranch a few times since the filming. Those close to him say he walks the grounds quietly, touching the same objects his father once touched, trying to feel close to the man he lost when he was only 7. In many ways, Neverland has become more than just a piece of land. It is now a symbol of Michael Jackson's entire life, a place of impossible dreams, deep loneliness, childlike wonder, and enduring love. The warehouse discovery in 2024 didn't just give the world new props for a movie, it gave us a rare, intimate look at the real Michael Jackson. Not the performer, not the controversy, but the gentle, wounded, hopeful man who built a fantasy kingdom because the real world had been too cruel to him. 17 years after his death, Michael Jackson's presence at Neverland feels stronger than ever. The music still plays on the wind, the lights still flicker at night, the carousel still waits, and somewhere in that secret warehouse, his most personal treasures continue to guard the quiet heart of a legend who never truly left. Neverland isn't just frozen in time. It is alive with memory, with mystery, and with a love that refuses to fade. Michael Jackson may have left this world in 2009, but in the rolling hills of Santa Ynez Valley, in the dust-covered cars, in the handwritten notes, and in the hearts of those who still feel his spirit walking the grounds, he is still very much at home. And perhaps he always will be. And that's what was hiding inside Michael Jackson's secret warehouse after 17 years. Now tell me in the comments, which item shocked or touched you the most? The Billie Jean shoes, the handwritten notebook, the Disney diorama, or something else? Drop your answer below and let me know why. If you enjoyed this, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a story. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.